The spit hung in the air for what felt like an eternity. Not flying, not falling, just suspended there between arrogance and consequence. Between a boy who'd never been told no and a woman who'd heard it her entire life. When it finally landed on Eleanor Brennan's cheek, sliding slowly down toward her worn apron, the Red Oak Diner didn't just go quiet. It went silent in the way a forest goes silent before a storm. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. The kind that tells you something fundamental has shifted in the world. Table 9 had been watching. 10 men, 10 leather vests, 10 sets of eyes that had seen things most people only have nightmares about. They'd been coming to this diner every other Thursday for 20 years. Same table, same order, same quiet respect for the woman who always remembered how they took their coffee. But on this particular morning, in this particular moment, coincidence became fate. And Prescott Whitmore was about to learn that in this diner on this day, he'd picked the wrong woman to humiliate, because those 10 men just made it their business. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Every war has a beginning. Every battle has a first shot. And this story started 22 hours before that spit left Prescott's mouth. It started the way Eleanor Brennan's days had started for the last 31 years. In darkness, in silence, in the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix anymore. 5 in the morning and the alarm hadn't even sounded yet. Eleanor's eyes opened on their own the way they always did these days. Her body knew the rhythm better than any clock. 62 years of living will do that. Teach you that rest is a luxury. That morning comes whether you're ready or not. She lay there for a moment in the pre-dawn dark of her small house on Maple Street. The kind of house that used to be called a starter home back when people believed you started somewhere and moved up. Eleanor had started here 38 years ago with her husband, Frank. They were going to move up, going to get that place with the big yard and the porch swing. Then Frank died, and starter homes become forever homes real quick when you're raising a granddaughter on a waitress's salary. The floorboards creaked as Eleanor swung her legs out of bed. Every morning, same creak. Same sharp reminder in her knees and hips that the body keeps score even when the spirit refuses to quit. The arthritis had been getting worse. The prescription bottles on her nightstand told that story. 2 of them empty, 1 with 3 pills left. The insurance had lapsed again last month. Something about paperwork, always paperwork. She'd buy more when she could. Until then, there was ibuprofen and stubbornness. Eleanor moved through her morning routine in near darkness. Muscle memory guiding her hands. Coffee first. Always coffee. The cheap kind that comes in a red can because when you've been drinking it for 40 years, you stop tasting the difference anyway. While it percolated, she laid out Maisie's clothes for school. 8 years old, 2nd grade, smart as a whip and twice as stubborn as her grandmother. The child was still asleep down the hall, the only grandchild Eleanor had left. The only piece of her son Daniel that wasn't sitting in a prison cell upstate. Don't think about Daniel. Not this early. Not when you need to get through a shift. But the mind wanders where it wants, doesn't it? And Eleanor's mind wandered to the framed photo on the mantel. Daniel in his high school football uniform. Bright smile. Bright future. Before the pills. Before the arrest. Before he became another statistic in a crisis nobody seems able to stop. Maisie stirred as Eleanor cracked eggs into a pan. Grandma's small voice. Sleep thick. Morning, baby girl. You got another hour. Go back to sleep. Is Daddy coming home soon? The eggs sizzled. Eleanor's hand didn't shake. Couldn't let it shake. Not for this question. Not for the 100th time she'd answered it. Soon, honey. He's getting better. You just focus on school, okay? Okay, Grandma. Soon. That word doing a lot of heavy lifting. Daniel had 4 more years on his sentence. 4 more years of Maisie asking. 4 more years of Eleanor lying. But sometimes love looks like a law that gets a child through the night. 6:30, and Eleanor's '98 Honda Civic coughed to life in the driveway. Check engine light glowing like it had been for the past 8 months. The mechanic said it was the catalytic converter. Said it'd be about $1,200 to fix. Eleanor said she'd think about it. She'd been thinking about it for 8 months. The drive to Red Oak Diner took 11 minutes through the sleeping streets of Millbrook, Montana. Population 4,200. The kind of town where everybody knows your name and half of them know your business. Where the biggest employer is the lumber mill on the north side and the biggest dream is getting out. Eleanor had stopped dreaming about getting out somewhere around 1985. Now she dreamed smaller. Maisie's college fund, the orthodontist bill, making it through another winter without the furnace dying. Red Oak Diner sat on the corner of Main and Fifth, single story, red brick, neon sign that said "Eat" in letters that had been buzzing since Reagan was president. The parking lot was empty except for Dutch Morrison's pickup truck. Dutch owned the place, 67 years old, former Marine. The kind of man who said Semper Fi unironically and meant every syllable. Eleanor had been working for Dutch for 31 years, longer than some marriages, longer than most careers. He'd hired her in 1995 when she was 31 and desperate and willing to work any shift nobody else wanted. Over 3 decades later, she was still working those shifts. The back door was unlocked. Always was. Dutch believed locks kept out honest people and annoyed dishonest ones. "Morning, Ellie," Dutch's voice from the kitchen. Gravel and cigarettes, though he'd quit smoking 15 years ago. Some things leave a mark. "Morning, Dutch. Coffee's on. You're a saint. Just a man who knows you don't mess with a woman before she's had her caffeine." The diner smelled like it always did. Coffee and bacon grease and something else. Something Eleanor could never quite name. Possibility, maybe. Or just nostalgia for a time when diners like this meant something more than cheap food and cheaper coffee. She moved through her opening routine like a dancer who'd performed the same piece 10,000 times. Filled the napkin dispensers, checked the salt and pepper shakers, wiped down the counters, flipped the sign from closed to open. Every movement practiced, every step economical. Eleanor had learned a long time ago that efficiency was survival. Wasted motion meant wasted energy. Wasted energy meant getting home later. Getting home later meant less time with Maisie. By 7, the first regular walked through the door. Timothy Hodges, retired postal worker, 73 years old, sat at the counter, same stool, every single morning for 12 years. Eleanor was pouring his coffee before he sat down. "Morning, Tim." "Usual." He nodded, didn't need to say it. 2 eggs over easy, bacon, wheat toast, orange juice. Some conversations you have so many times they become shorthand. Become silence with understanding. That's what Eleanor loved about this job, if she was being honest. Not the pay, which was terrible. Not the hours, which were worse. But the routine. The knowing. The way certain customers became fixtures. Became family almost. The way she could pour coffee and know she'd made someone's morning just a little bit better. Small victories. That's all life was after a certain age. String enough of them together and you called it a good day. 7:15 and the rumble started. Low at first, distant, like thunder rolling across the Montana plains, though the sky was clear and blue. Then it grew, deeper, closer, the kind of sound you feel in your chest before you hear it with your ears. Timothy Hodges looked up from his newspaper. Dutch stepped out from the kitchen. Eleanor set down the coffee pot. Through the front windows they appeared. 10 motorcycles, Harley Davidsons every one, chrome catching the early morning sun like mirrors reflecting fire. They rolled into the parking lot in formation. Not aggressive, not chaotic, disciplined, military precise. The Iron Brotherhood Motorcycle Club. That's what some people called them. The Devil's Advocates. That's what they called themselves. The patch on their vest told the story if you knew how to read it. An iron fist clenched around a gavel. The words stitched beneath "protect those who serve." The man who dismounted first was Dalton Grayson, 61 years old, silver threading through his beard like wisdom earning its place. Eyes that had seen jungles and deserts. Eyes that had seen men die and economies collapse. Eyes that still looked for the good in things even when the world made that harder every year. They called him Hammer. Not because he was violent. Dalton Grayson hadn't thrown a punch in anger in over 2 decades. They called him Hammer because he was solid, unmovable. The kind of man who drove stakes into the ground and built foundations that lasted. Behind him, 9 others swung off their bikes. Knox Patterson, 59. They called him Wrench. Owned 3 auto shops across the state. Hands that could rebuild an engine blindfolded, and had held his daughter while she died of leukemia at 17. Merritt Sullivan, 60. Doc to anyone who knew him, former Army medic. The kind of man who'd seen enough blood that the sight of it didn't faze him anymore, but the waste of it made him angry. Cassian Stone, 58. Shepherd. retired Methodist minister. Still preached sometimes at the VA hospital. Still believed in redemption, even when redemption seemed in short supply. 7 others, all between 55 and 65. All veterans, all men who'd signed up to serve their country in different wars, different decades, different reasons. But they'd all come back changed. Come back understanding that the real battle wasn't over there. It was right here, in diners like this, in moments like these, in the spaces where power meets powerlessness and somebody has to choose which side they're on. They filed into Red Oak Diner with the easy familiarity of men who'd ridden together for decades, men who'd bled together, buried friends together, built something together that was bigger than themselves. Table 9. Always Table 9. It had become their spot over 20 years of Thursday morning breakfasts. The way certain people claim certain pews in church. Sacred almost. Eleanor appeared with a coffee pot and 10 cups balanced on a tray. That same warm smile she gave Timothy Hodges. The same one she gave every customer who walked through that door. Morning, gentlemen, right on time. Dalton nodded, studying her face for just a moment longer than necessary. He noticed something in Eleanor's eyes that morning. A weariness he recognized. A heaviness he'd seen before in people who were carrying more than they should. He'd seen it in his mother's eyes before. The Brotherhood had a rule, one they'd lived by for 30 years. One that Dalton had written himself after Margaret Grayson put a gun to her head in 1978. Watch how people treat service workers. It tells you everything you need to know about a person's character. Eleanor started pouring coffee. Dalton watched the way her hands moved. Practiced, efficient. The slight tremor in her right hand when she thought nobody was looking. The way she winced when she bent to set Doc's cup down. The way she smiled through what was clearly pain. "You doing all right?" Ellie Doc's voice. Quiet, concerned. "Oh, you know me, Doc. Can't complain." That doesn't answer my question. Eleanor's smile widened, became armor. "I'm good, really. You boys want your usual." Dalton watched the exchange, filed it away. Something was wrong. Maybe nothing serious. Maybe just life being life. But something. The Iron Brotherhood had another rule. When you see something, you do something. No exceptions. No excuses. They'd been coming to this diner for 20 years specifically because of Eleanor Brennan. Because she was what they had all been fighting for in their own way. A woman who showed up, who worked hard, who treated people with dignity even when dignity didn't pay the bills. She represented something, someone worth protecting, worth honoring, worth standing up for when the moment came. And at 7:45 on that particular Thursday morning, the moment was about to arrive. The Mercedes pulled into the parking lot like it owned the place. Or like it was disappointed it didn't. Sleek, black, the kind of expensive that whispers instead of shouts. It angled across 2 parking spaces, diagonal across the painted lines, like those lines were suggestions for people who had to follow rules. The driver's door opened and out stepped Prescott Whitmore. 19 years old, phone already in hand, designer sunglasses catching the morning sun, clothes that cost more than Eleanor made in a month, worn with the casual indifference of someone who'd never checked a price tag. Never had to. Prescott Whitmore. That's what it said on his driver's license, on his credit cards, on the acceptance letter from Georgetown University that currently sat framed in his father's Senate office. Press, his friends called him. The boys from prep school, the guys at the country club, the ones who'd also never heard the word no without it being immediately followed by "just kidding" or "I'll handle it." Prescott Whitmore was the kind of young man who'd been raised to believe the world had been built for him, that other people existed to serve his convenience, that consequences were things that happened to other people. He was about to learn different. Prescott pushed through the door of Red Oak Diner without looking up from his phone. Didn't acknowledge the other customers. Didn't say good morning. Just slid into a booth near the window and continued scrolling. His face illuminated by that blue glow, that anywhere but here light. Eleanor approached with a menu and that same patient warmth she'd shown everyone else this morning. "Morning, honey." Coffee to start. Prescott didn't look up. His thumb kept scrolling. Social media. Something mindless. Something more important than the human being standing next to him. Is it actually good coffee or that burnt diner garbage? Eleanor's smile didn't falter. Couldn't afford to let it falter. Not if she wanted to keep this job. Not if she wanted to make rent this month. It's fresh. Made it 20 minutes ago. Whatever. Black. And I need a few minutes with the menu. He waved his hand. Dismissive. The way you wave away a fly. At table 9, Knox set down his fork a little harder than necessary. Merritt's jaw tightened. Shepard's eyes closed for just a second, the way they did when he was asking God for patience. Dalton watched, said nothing. But he was watching. Eleanor returned with the coffee pot poured carefully. Prescott took one sip and his face twisted like she'd served him motor oil. This is what you call fresh. How long has this been sitting? Just made it like I said. Can I get you know what? Forget it, just bring me egg whites. Whole wheat toast, dry. And I want fresh fruit, not the canned stuff. Fresh. You understand the difference, right? The words weren't just rude. They were calculated, each one designed to establish a hierarchy, to remind Eleanor that he was up here and she was down there. It was a skill Prescott had perfected over 19 years of practice. The art of making people feel small without ever raising your voice or using obvious slurs. Just a tone, an implication, a question mark placed where it would cut deepest. Eleanor wrote down the order. Her hand didn't shake. Couldn't let it shake. I'll get that right out. Make sure you do. I'm kind of in a hurry. He said this while continuing to scroll through his phone, making it clear he wasn't in a hurry at all. He just wanted her to feel like her speed mattered to his convenience. At table 9, Dalton set down his coffee cup. The ceramic clicked against the saucer. Just once. But in that moment it sounded loud. Knox leaned back in the booth, arms crossed, the way a man crosses his arms when he's keeping his hands busy so they don't do something he might regret. Doc's knuckles had gone white around his fork. They'd seen this before. All of them had, the way certain people treated others when they thought nobody important was watching. The casual cruelty that came from never having to see service workers as human beings. The way Prescott Whitmore was treating Eleanor Brennan was exactly the way someone had treated Margaret Grayson in 1978. Dalton remembered that day. He'd been 13, sitting at a table not unlike this one, watching his mother serve a man in an expensive suit, watching that man treat her like she was nothing, like she was invisible, like she was an inconvenience to his morning. Dalton had been too young, too scared, too uncertain to stand up. And 2 weeks later, his mother was dead. That was 48 years ago. 48 years of carrying that weight, of knowing he'd failed her, of building the Iron Brotherhood specifically so nobody would ever have to stand alone the way Margaret Grayson had stood alone. So when Eleanor returned to Prescott's table 12 minutes later, with his order egg whites, whole wheat toast, dry fresh strawberries, and melon on the side, exactly as he'd requested, Dalton was already on edge. When Prescott looked at that plate like Eleanor had delivered something scraped off the bottom of a dumpster, every man at table 9 felt it. Prescott poked at the egg whites with his fork. His face showed theatrical disgust. These look runny. They're scrambled egg whites just like you. I didn't say scrambled. I wanted them folded like an omelet, but without the yolk. And this toast. He held up the bread like evidence in a trial. This is barely warm. I said I wanted it toasted. Eleanor's voice stayed level, professional, the way it had stayed level for 31 years of difficult customers and impossible demands. You said dry toast, so dry doesn't mean raw. It means toasted without butter. How do you not know that? Do you even know how to do your job? His voice rose. Just enough, just loud enough that the couple at the next table glanced over, then quickly looked away. The way people look away from accidents, from ugliness, from things they don't want to be part of. I'm sorry for the confusion. Let me take it back and... No, wait. Prescott picked up his phone, opened the Notes app, started typing like he was documenting evidence. Let me spell this out for you, since this seems complicated. I want egg whites folded, not scrambled. I want toast that is actually toasted whole wheat, no butter, no jam, nothing on it. I want the fruit on a separate plate, not touching anything else. Do you think you can handle that? Or should I draw you a picture? Eleanor took the plate. Her hands were steady, but her voice was quieter now, smaller. I'll get that fixed right away. She walked back to the kitchen. Dutch was already remaking the order. He'd heard everything. The whole diner had heard everything. Want me to handle this? Ellie, no Dutch. I got it. It's fine. But it wasn't fine. Eleanor could feel something building in her chest, something that felt like tears but tasted like anger. 31 years of this, 31 years of smiling through it, 31 years of being treated like she was less than human because she brought people food for a living. Usually she could handle it. Usually she could let it roll off. But this morning, with the arthritis screaming in her knees and the empty prescription bottles and Maisie asking when Daddy was coming home this morning, it was harder. At table 9, Shepard was praying, actually praying, lips moving silently the way he prayed before they rolled into combat zones. Knox had his phone out recording just in case. Doc was watching Eleanor's face when she came back out with the second order, watching the way she was holding herself together with spit and determination. Merritt Sullivan had been a medic for 22 years. He'd seen men hold their guts in with their bare hands and still crack jokes. He'd seen women walk on broken legs to get their children to safety. He knew what barely holding on looked like. Eleanor was barely holding on. 15 minutes passed. The kitchen remade Prescott's order exactly to his specifications. Eleanor carried it out, set it down, and before she could even step back, Prescott cut into the eggs. His face transformed. Theatrical disgust becoming theatrical rage. "Are you kidding me right now?" His voice cut through the diner's morning chatter like a knife through silk. Every conversation stopped. Every fork paused halfway to every mouth. "This is exactly the same thing you brought me before. Sir, I promise you we remade everything exactly." "Don't call me sir like that's going to fix your incompetence." Prescott stood up abruptly. Suddenly, he was towering over Eleanor, 6 feet tall, athletic from tennis lessons and personal trainers, using every inch of that height to make her feel small. Eleanor Brennan was 5'4", 62 years old, running on 5 hours of sleep and the weight of a world that hadn't been kind. This is garbage. Absolute garbage. I don't know what kind of place you think you're running here, but this is unacceptable. He picked up the plate, slammed it down on the table. The crash echoed, eggs scattered, toast broke, fruit rolled onto the floor. The diner went silent. Not quiet, silent. The difference between those two things is a canyon. Eleanor stood there, frozen. For just a moment, the professional mask slipped. For just a moment, she was just a tired woman being humiliated in front of everyone she'd served for 3 decades. Let you get me what? Another round of food poisoning. You know what your problem is?" Prescott's voice dripped with contempt now, each word chosen carefully, each syllable designed to wound. "People like you think showing up and doing the bare minimum is worth something. This is why you work in a place like this. This is why you'll always work in places like this. You're not good enough for anything better." At table 9, Knox's knuckles went white around his coffee cup. Merritt set down his fork with a click that sounded like a gunshot. Shepard stopped praying and started watching. Really watching. Dalton Grayson's entire body had gone still, the way a predator goes still before it moves. But Eleanor spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "I apologize. I can offer you something else, or if you'd prefer, there's no charge for, do you know who my father is?" Prescott's voice turned cold now, dangerous in a different way. The way a threat is dangerous when it's backed by power. Senator Randall Whitmore. One phone call and this whole place shuts down. One phone call and you're out of whatever pathetic job this is. So maybe you should think really carefully about how you handle this next part. He stood there, waiting, expecting her to crumble, to apologize, to make it right. Eleanor walked back to the kitchen. Her hands were trembling now, not slightly, visibly. The tremor she'd been hiding all morning was out in the open. Dutch saw it move to intercept. "Ellie, let me know, Dutch. I got it. It's fine." But her voice cracked on the word fine and everyone heard it. She remade the order herself this time. Hands shaking, eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. Because if she cried, she lost. If she cried, Prescott won. If she cried, every difficult customer for the last 31 years won. So she didn't cry. She made the eggs, toasted the bread, plated the fruit. And she walked back out there, with her chin up and her shoulders back, because Eleanor Brennan had raised a son alone and buried a husband and was raising a granddaughter now, and she didn't quit. Not ever. She set the plate in front of Prescott, stepped back, waited. He didn't even look at the food, just picked up his fork, took one theatrical bite of the eggs, chewed slowly like he was a food critic at some Michelin-starred restaurant instead of a spoiled child in a small-town diner. Then his face contorted, exaggerated revulsion. "This is disgusting." He dropped the fork. The clatter echoed in the silence. "Absolutely disgusting. How many times do I have to tell you people how to do the most basic thing?" He stood up, used his height, towered over her. And Eleanor Brennan, 62 years old survivor of poverty and grief, and 3 decades of people like Prescott. Whitmore felt something inside her start to break. Not her resolve, not her dignity, her hope maybe. That small kernel of hope that says tomorrow might be better. That says this job has meaning. That says treating people with respect might actually matter in the end. Prescott saw it, saw that crack forming, and like any predator, he went for it. You know what? His voice dropped. Quieter, more deliberate, more cruel. "I don't think you're worth the effort." And then he did it. He spit directly in her face, deliberately, with a kind of contempt that turns a human being into a target, a person into an object to be degraded. The diner froze. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every fork paused halfway to every mouth. The coffee maker stopped gurgling. Dutch emerging from the kitchen stopped mid-step. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. One human being had just decided another human being was beneath basic dignity, and 10-minute table 9 had just witnessed it. Eleanor stood there, the spit slowly sliding down her cheek. Her hand came up automatically, reached for her apron to wipe it away, but stopped halfway. Tears formed in her eyes, not from pain, from humiliation, from the sudden crushing weight of being made invisible and then violated in front of everyone, from knowing she needed this job, needed the tips, needed to smile through this because Maisie needed new shoes and the electric bill was due and she couldn't afford to fight back. So she stood there, spit on her face, silence crushing down around her, and Dalton Grayson stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the linoleum floor cut through the silence like a gunshot. Not dramatic, not loud, but in that moment it was the only sound in the entire world. Dalton had made a promise to himself 48 years ago, after watching his mother cry, after finding her body, after burying her with the knowledge that he could have done something, should have done something. The promise was simple. Protect those who can't protect themselves. He'd built a motorcycle club around that promise, recruited men who believed it, lived it for 30 years. And on this morning in this diner, that promise was being called due. Dalton walked across the floor with a kind of calm that comes from a man who's been in real danger and knows this isn't it. His boots made steady, measured sounds against the linoleum. He wasn't rushing, wasn't posturing, just moving with purpose. The way a man moves when he's made a decision and nothing's going to unmake it. He stopped beside Prescott's table, close enough to be present, not threatening, not aggressive, just there. His voice when it came was low and steady, the voice of a man who'd given orders under fire and expected them to be followed. "You're going to apologize to the lady." Prescott looked up from his phone. Confusion flickered across his face. Then he saw the leather vest, the patches, the silver beard. The eyes that had seen things Prescott couldn't imagine. And something like amusement crossed his features. He actually laughed. "Are you serious right now? You need to step back, old man, before you get yourself in trouble." Behind Dalton, 9 chairs scraped against the floor in near unison. Knox, Merritt, Shepard, 6 others, standing up, not moving forward, not threatening, just present. A wall of leather and solidarity. "The only person in trouble here is you, son." Dalton's voice didn't rise, didn't need to. "That woman deserves an apology, and you're going to give her one." Prescott stood up, puffed his chest, trying to reclaim the height advantage, trying to remember he was supposed to be the one with power here. "You know what I'm calling the police. This is harassment. You're threatening me." He pulled out his phone, waved it like a weapon. "My father is Senator Randall Whitmore, and when he hears about this, you're going to wish you stayed in whatever hole you crawled out of." The Iron Brotherhood didn't move, didn't speak. They didn't have to. For the first time in his 19 years of life, Prescott Whitmore felt what actual consequences might look like. His confidence wavered. His hand with the phone dropped slightly. But pride is a powerful thing, especially in young men who've never had to back down from anything in their lives. His jaw set, his shoulders squared. You think you scare me? You think some biker gang costume party is going to make me do anything? His voice rose, but there was a brittleness to it now, like ice cracking under weight. I don't owe that woman anything. She's a waitress. She screwed up my order 3 times. If anything, she should apologize to me. Dalton took a breath, the kind of breath a teacher takes before explaining something to a student who's not getting it, who might never get it, but you try anyway because that's what teachers do. Let me tell you something about respect, son. His voice stayed calm, patient even. We don't start trouble. We ride our bikes. We go to work. We take care of our families. But we finish disrespect, especially when it's aimed at people who can't defend themselves without losing everything they have. He gestured toward Eleanor. She was still standing there, frozen. The spit now wiped away with her apron, but the stain of it still visible on her cheek, still visible in her eyes. That woman has more dignity in her exhausted smile than you'll have in your entire life. And you spit on her, in front of everyone, like she's nothing. She is nothing. The words came out before Prescott could stop them. Automatic, reflexive, the kind of thing you say when you have been raised to believe it so thoroughly you don't even question it anymore. Then we have a problem. Dalton's tone didn't change, but something in the air shifted. Prescott moved toward the door, trying to end this on his terms, trying to walk away with some shred of control. But as he approached the exit, he found his path blocked. Not aggressively, not threateningly. Knox and Merritt were just standing there, near the door, existing in the space Prescott needed to occupy. Excuse me. Prescott's voice tight. They didn't move. Behind the counter, Dutch Morrison picked up the phone. His hand shook slightly as he dialed, but it wasn't the police he was calling. It was someone else. Someone who needed to know his son had just crossed a line there was no coming back from. Prescott turned back to the room. 10 bikers, 1 waitress, still frozen by table 7, a diner full of witnesses, and for the first time in his 19 years, nowhere to run. Fine. Fine. I apologize. Okay. Happy, the words came out flat. Perfunctory. The kind of apology that means nothing because it costs nothing. Dalton shook his head slowly. That's not how this works. What do you want from me? I want you to understand what you did. I want you to feel it. And I want you to learn from it. I said I'm sorry. Sorry is just a word, son. You don't learn by apologizing. You learn by understanding. And in that moment, as Prescott Whitmore stood in Red Oak Diner, surrounded by 10 men who decided he wasn't leaving until something fundamental changed, the door open. Senator Randall Whitmore walked in. 56 years old, expensive suit, political smile that died the moment he saw his son surrounded by leather vests in judgment. What the hell is going on here? His voice had that senatorial boom, that I'm in charge authority that came from 20 years of people doing what he said because he said it. Dalton turned to face him, and in that moment, recognition flickered across both their faces. They knew each other, or rather, they'd known each other a long time ago, in a different context. 48 years ago, a young lawyer named Randall Whitmore had defended a man accused of assaulting a waitress named Margaret Grayson, had gotten him off on a technicality, had destroyed Margaret's credibility on the stand, had made her look like a liar seeking attention. 2 weeks after losing that case, Margaret Grayson killed herself, and Dalton Grayson never forgot the man who'd made that possible. The universe has a funny way of settling debts. Senator, Dalton's voice was perfectly neutral. Your son just assaulted one of my friends. That's ridiculous. Press would never. He spit in her face. I have video, so do half the people in this diner. Randall Whitmore's political instincts kicked in immediately. Damage control, mitigation, the machinery of power spinning up to protect what needed protecting. I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. Press apologized to the woman and let's... He already apologized, Senator. Words are cheap. Your son needs to learn what consequences feel like. Are you threatening my son? No, sir, I'm offering him an education. The 2 men stared at each other. 48 years of history hanging between them. A dead woman neither of them could forget. A debt that had never been paid. What do you want? Randall Whitmore's voice was cold now. Calculating. 60 days. Your son works here. Full shifts, learns what it means to serve people, learns what Eleanor does every single day. At the end of 60 days, we're done. He goes back to his life, but he goes back different. That's absurd. All you are what senators sue us. Go ahead. We've got video of your son assaulting a 62-year-old woman. Wonder how that plays in an election year. Wonder how it plays when I send it to every news outlet in the state. Randall Whitmore's jaw clenched. His hands curled into fists, then relaxed. The political calculation running. The risk assessment. The cost-benefit analysis of a man who'd spent 2 decades weighing options and choosing the most advantageous path. Fine. 60 days. But this ends here. No press. No charges. This ends. Dalton nodded once. This ends when your son learns what he needs to learn, not before. Senator Whitmore grabbed his son's arm, pulled him toward the door, but before they left, he turned back one more time. You're making a mistake, Grayson. I made my mistake 48 years ago, Senator, when I didn't stand up for my mother. I'm not making it again. The door closed behind them. The Mercedes roared to life, pulled out of the parking lot, gravel spitting from expensive tires. The diner stayed silent for another moment, processing, absorbing, understanding that something fundamental had just shifted. Then Dutch started clapping. Slow, deliberate. One man showing respect. Timothy Hodges joined in. Then the couple at table 3. Then everyone. A small diner full of regular people showing Eleanor Brennan what Prescott Whitmore had never understood. That dignity isn't given. It's claimed. And sometimes it's defended. Eleanor stood there, tears finally falling. But not from humiliation anymore. From something else. Something that felt like being seen. Like mattering. Dalton walked over to her, gently, carefully. The way you approach someone who's been hurt. You okay, Ellie? She nodded. Couldn't speak yet. You didn't deserve that. Any of that. Thank you. Barely a whisper. Nothing to thank me for. That's just what family does. And Eleanor Brennan, who'd been alone for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to have people stand with her, finally understood she wasn't alone anymore. The Iron Brotherhood had made her their business. And they didn't quit. Not ever. 3 days later, Prescott Whitmore pushed through the back door of Red Oak Diner at 5:45 in the morning, wearing borrowed non-slip shoes that didn't fit quite right and an apron that smelled like someone else's shift. The sky was still dark, the kind of dark that makes you question every decision that led you to this moment. The kind of dark where the only sound is your own breathing and the distant hum of a town that is still sleeping. Prescott had never been awake this early in his life. Not voluntarily, not for something that mattered. But here he was. Because his father had made it very clear that refusing wasn't an option. Not with an election 8 weeks away. Not with video footage of his son spitting on a 62-year-old woman potentially one click away from going viral. Dutch Morrison was already in the kitchen. 77 years old and still the first one in, still firing up the griddle, still brewing the first pot of poofy like he'd been doing for 40 years. Morning, Dutch's voice. Gravel in assessment. Morning, Prescott's voice. Resentment in exhaustion. Ellie'll be here in 15 minutes. She's going to train you. You listen to everything she says. You do everything she tells you. You got questions, you ask. You got attitude, you swallow it. We clear crystal. Good. Coffee's over there. Help yourself. You're going to need it. Prescott poured a cup. Tasted it. It was terrible. The same burnt diner garbage he'd complained about 3 days ago. But this morning it was the only caffeine between him and complete collapse. So he drank it. Funny how perspective changes when you're the one who needs something. Eleanor arrived at 6 exactly. Same worn Honda Civic coughing into the parking lot. Same careful walk to the back door favoring her left knee. Same quiet efficiency as she tied her apron and checked the dining room setup. She saw Prescott standing by the coffee pot. Their eyes met. Neither spoke for a long moment. What do you say to someone who humiliated you? What do you say to someone you humiliated? There's no script for that. No manual. Morning, Eleanor's voice. Professional. Careful. Morning, Prescott's voice, uncertain. Something that might have been shame if he knew what shame felt like. Dutch says you're here to learn, so let's get started. No warmth, no coldness. Just the voice of a woman who'd been given a all and was going to do it. Because that's what Eleanor Brennan did. She showed up. She did the work. Even when the work meant training the person who would spit in her face. The first hour was set up. Eleanor showed Prescott how to check salt and pepper shakers, how to fill napkin dispensers, how to wipe down tables so they didn't streak, how to arrange the condiments just so. Tasks that seemed mindless until you realized they had to be done perfectly. Every single morning, for a single customer walked through that door. Why does it matter which way the ketchup bottle faces? Prescott asked. Not antagonistic, genuinely confused. Because Mrs. Henderson sits at table 4 every Tuesday and Thursday. She has arthritis in her right hand. If the ketchup bottle faces left, she can grab it easier. Small things matter, Press. Small kindnesses add up. Press. She called him Press. Not Prescott, not you. Like he was a person. Like he had a name worth using. It was such a small thing. But it landed somewhere deep. By 7, the diner was open. By 7:15, Timothy Hodges walked through the door and sat at his usual stool. Your turn, Eleanor handed Prescott a coffee pot. Go pour Mr. Hodges his coffee. Just like that, just like that. Left hand under the pot, right hand on the handle. Pour smooth. Don't fill it all the way to the top. Leave room for cream. Prescott walked over. The coffee pot felt heavier than it should. Or maybe his hand was shaking. Maybe both. Morning, Mr. Hodges. Coffee. Timothy looked up, recognized him. Prescott saw it happen. Saw the moment this retired postal worker remembered the scene from 3 days ago. Saw judgment form. You the Whitmore boy. Not a question, a statement. Yes, sir. You here to learn, or you here because Daddy made you. Prescott opened his mouth. The automatic lie was right there. The easy answer that would smooth this over. But something stopped him. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe the way Eleanor was watching. Maybe something else. Both, I think. Timothy studied him for a long moment, then held out his cup. Then let's see if you can pour coffee without making a mess of it. Prescott poured. His hand shook slightly. A few drops hit the saucer, but the cup filled. Timothy took a sip. Not bad. You'll get better. It was such a small thing. Such a nothing moment. But Prescott felt something shift. This man could have destroyed him. Could have made this moment unbearable. Instead, he'd given him a chance. Small kindnesses add up. By 8, the morning rush was starting. And Prescott Whitmore discovered what hard work actually meant. Not hard like tennis practice, where you had a coach and water breaks and someone telling you you're doing great. Not hard like SAT prep, where the worst consequence was having to take it again. Hard like your feet hurt and your back aches and you've been moving nonstop for 2 hours and there's 4 more hours to go and you can't sit down because there are people waiting and they don't care that you're tired. Hard like real life. Table 6 wanted their eggs over easy, but they came out over medium. Prescott had to walk back to the kitchen and ask Dutch to remake them. And Dutch didn't say anything. Just cracked 2 new eggs and started again. And Prescott felt the weight of wasting food, wasting time, wasting this man's effort. Table 9 ordered hash browns crispy, but Prescott wrote down well done. The kitchen made them too hard. The customer sent them back with a look that said, you're incompetent. And Prescott felt his face flush with embarrassment. Table 12 wanted decaf and Prescott poured regular. Didn't realize until the woman took a sip and said, this isn't decaf, honey. And Prescott had to apologize and explain and bring a new cup. The woman was kind about it, but kindness somehow made it worse because he didn't deserve kindness. Did he? By 10, Prescott had spilled coffee on himself twice, dropped a plate of toast, gotten 3 orders wrong, was seriously considering walking out the back door and never coming back. Eleanor appeared beside him at the coffee station. Quiet, steady. You're doing fine. I'm doing terrible. You're doing fine for day 1. Everybody's terrible on day 1. How long did it take you to get good at this? Eleanor smiled. Small, sad almost. 31 years, still learning. She walked away before he could respond, but the words stayed with him. 31 years. This woman had been doing this job longer than he'd been alive. And she was still learning, still trying, still showing up. What the hell had he been doing with his 19 years? The lunch shift came. More customers, more orders, more opportunities to screw up. And Prescott screwed up plenty. But he also started to notice things. The way Eleanor moved through the dining room like water. Efficient, purposeful, never wasting a step. The way she remembered everyone's names, everyone's orders, everyone's preferences. The way she smiled at the rude customers with the same warmth she gave the kind ones. Because the smile wasn't about them, it was about her. About choosing kindness even when kindness wasn't returned. At 1:30, a man walked into the diner. Mid-60s, wearing a veteran's cap, moving with the careful stiffness of someone whose body had been through things and remembered. He looked at Prescott. Recognition flickered. Then something harder. Eleanor saw it, started to move that direction, but the man held up his hand. "I got table 7, Ellie. I want the boy." Prescott walked over, something in his chest tightened. He knew this feeling now, the feeling of facing something you'd done and couldn't undo. "What can I get you, sir?" The man stared at him, long enough that Prescott wanted to look away. But he didn't. Couldn't. "You know who I am." "No, sir. Gideon Fletcher. You knew my son, Clayton." The name hit Prescott like a physical blow. Clayton Fletcher, sophomore year. The kid who tried to join his friend group. The kid Prescott had decided wasn't good enough, wasn't cool enough. The kid Prescott and his friends had made miserable for 8 months until Clayton transferred schools. The kid who'd killed himself 18 months ago. Prescott's mouth went dry. Mr. Fletcher eyed coffee, black, pancakes, bacon. "That's what I want. That's what you're going to get me. And you're going to do it with a smile. Because that's what service workers do. They smile even when they want to scream. Even when they want to tell you exactly what they think of you. They smile because it's their job." Gideon's voice was perfectly level, perfectly calm, and absolutely devastating. "Yes, sir." Prescott walked to the kitchen. His hands were shaking. Really shaking. He gave Dutch the order. Dutch looked at him, saw something. "You all right, kid? That man's son, I knew him. I wasn't good to him." Dutch didn't say anything, just started making the pancakes. But his silence felt like judgment. Maybe because it was. Prescott brought out the food, set it down carefully. Gideon didn't look at it. "You remember my boy?" "Yes, sir." "You remember what you did to him?" "Yes, sir." "You know why he killed himself?" Prescott couldn't speak, couldn't move. Depression. That's what the doctor said. Chemical imbalance. Might have happened anyway. But you didn't help, did you? You and your friends. Making him feel like he wasn't worth the air he breathed. "Mr. Fletcher, I'm so..." "Don't." Gideon's voice sharp. "Don't apologize. Apologies are words. Words are cheap. You want to make this right. You can't. My son is dead. Nothing makes that right. But you can learn. You can change. You can become someone who doesn't destroy people for entertainment." He picked up his fork. Cut into the pancakes. Took a bite. "These are good. Tell the cook I said so." Prescott stood there, frozen, not knowing if he was dismissed, not knowing what to say. Mr. Fletcher, Gideon looked up, and something in his eyes had changed. Still hard, still hurt, but something else too. "My son was kind, even when you weren't, even when nobody was. He believed people could change. I'm not sure I believe that, but I'm here because Clayton would have wanted me to give you a chance. So I'm giving you one. Don't waste it." Prescott walked away, made it to the kitchen, leaned against the wall, felt something breaking inside him, something that had needed to break for a long time. Eleanor found him there 10 minutes later. "You okay?" "No, want to talk about it? I don't deserve to talk about it." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, careful. "Press, don't know what you did before you came here. I don't know what kind of person you were, but I know what kind of person you're choosing to be right now. You're here. You're working. You're trying. That matters. Does it matter if I destroyed someone's life? If I'm part of the reason someone's dead? I don't know. I don't have those answers. But I know you can't change the past. You can only change what you do next. She walked away. Left him with that. You can only change what you do next. The afternoon crawled by. Prescott finished his shift at 3. 6 hours of work. It felt like 6 years. Every muscle hurt. His feet were killing him. His pride was somewhere on the floor with the spilled coffee and broken toast. But he came back the next day, and the day after that. By the end of week 1, Prescott had learned how to pour coffee without spilling, how to carry 3 plates at once, how to smile at rude customers even when he wanted to scream. He'd also learned that Eleanor took the bus to work because her car had broken down and she couldn't afford to fix it, that she was raising her granddaughter alone, that she worked 2 jobs and still barely made rent. He'd learned that Dutch had served in Vietnam, that he'd opened this diner with money from his GI Bill because he wanted to create a place where everyone was welcome, where service workers were treated with dignity. He'd learned that the Iron Brotherhood came every Thursday, not just for coffee, but to check on Eleanor, to make sure she was okay, to be the family she didn't have anymore. He'd learned that the world was full of people who showed up every day and did hard things and never complained, because complaining was a luxury they couldn't afford. And he'd learned that he'd been one of the people making their lives harder. Week 2 started the same as week 1. 5:45, borrowed shoes, Eleanor's patient instruction. The morning rush, the mistakes, the small improvements. But on Thursday of week 2, everything changed. The Iron Brotherhood rolled into the parking lot at 7:15, same as always. 10 motorcycles, same formation, same ritual. They walked into the diner, saw Prescott behind the counter pouring coffee for Timothy Hodges. Dalton Grayson stopped. The 9 men behind him stopped. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Dalton nodded. Once. Small. Almost imperceptible. It wasn't approval. It was acknowledgement. You're still here. You're still trying. Morning hammer, Prescott's voice. Uncertain but genuine. Morning press. Coffee ready. Yes, sir. Just made it. Then let's see what you got. Prescott approached table 9 with a coffee pot and 10 cups. His hands didn't shake this time. Or if they did, he controlled it better. He poured for Dalton first, then Knox, then Merritt, then Shepard, then the others. Each pour steady, each cup filled just right, left room for cream. When he finished, Knox looked at his coffee, took a sip. Not bad, kid. Not bad at all. It was the first time any of them had acknowledged him as anything other than the enemy. The first time they'd seen him as a person instead of a problem. Prescott felt something warm in his chest, something that might have been pride if he'd earned the right to feel proud. Thank you, sir. Knox. Call me Knox. We don't do sir around here. Over the next week, something unexpected happened. The Brotherhood started teaching him. Not formally, not obviously, but in the way men who've lived full lives teach younger men who are just starting to figure things out. Knox showed him how to fix the diner's broken ice machine, taught him that most things that seem complicated are just a matter of patience and the right tools, that knowing how to fix things with your hands gives you a different kind of confidence. See this, Knox pointed to a loose belt. Whole machines down because of one part. Life's like that. Small things matter. Take care of the small things, the big things take care of themselves. Merritt, the former medic, showed him basic first aid. How to wrap an ankle, how to treat a burn, how to stay calm when someone's bleeding. Panic kills more people than injuries, Doc said. You learn to control your fear. You can save lives. You let your fear control you. You become part of the problem. Shepard, the retired minister, taught him something different, something harder. You know what repentance is, Press? They were cleaning up after the lunch shift. Prescott was scrubbing tables. Shepard was sweeping. Saying you're sorry, no. That's apology. Repentance is changing direction. It's not just feeling bad about what you did. It's becoming someone who wouldn't do it again. How do you know when you've changed enough? You don't. You just keep changing, keep trying, keep becoming. That's all any of us can do. By week 3, Prescott had fallen into a rhythm. The work was still hard, his body still hurt, but he'd stopped thinking about quitting, stopped counting down the days until his 60-day sentence was over, started thinking about what came after. One night he stayed late to help Eleanor close up. It wasn't required, wasn't part of the deal. But she'd looked tired and he had nowhere to be, and something in him wanted to help. They worked in silence for a while, wiping down tables, sweeping floors, the quiet work of closing a place down after a long day. "Can I ask you something?" Prescott's voice in the quiet. "Sure. Why are you being nice to me? After what I did, you could make this miserable. You'd have every right." Eleanor stopped sweeping, looked at him. Really looked at him. "You want the truth?" "Yes, ma'am." "At first I wasn't being nice, I was being professional. There's a difference. I needed this job. Couldn't afford to refuse to train you no matter how I felt about it. And now I see someone trying, someone learning, someone becoming something different than what he was. That's worth being kind to." She went back to sweeping. Prescott stood there processing. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I know," Gideon Fletcher said, "apologies are just words, but I need to say it. I'm sorry for what I did, for who I was, for not seeing you as a person. I know you are, and I appreciate that. But Press, you need to know something. I've had a lot of people apologize to me over the years, for being rude, for being demanding, for treating me like I'm invisible. Most of them meant it in the moment, but they all did it again the next time they got frustrated, because they didn't change. They just felt bad. How do I make sure I'm different? You keep showing up. You keep trying. You keep treating people with dignity, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. That's how." They finished cleaning, locked up, walked to the parking lot together. Eleanor to her bus stop, Prescott to his Mercedes. He looked at his car, looked at her bus stop, made a decision. "Let me drive you home." "That's not necessary, I know. Let me, anyway." Eleanor studied him for a moment, then nodded. They drove in silence for a while through the quiet streets of Millbrook, past the houses where people were having dinner, watching TV, living normal lives. "You ever wonder what your life would have been like if things were different?" Prescott asked. "Every day. You ever regretted the choices you made?" "Some of them. I regret not finishing college. Regret not pushing harder for things I wanted. But I don't regret my son, even though he broke my heart. Don't regret Maisie. Don't regret showing up every day even when it was hard. You can't build a life on regrets, Press. You can only build it on what you do next." There was that phrase again. What you do next. Prescott pulled up to Eleanor's house. Small, modest, but the lawn was trimmed. The porch was swept. Someone cared about this place. "Thank you for the ride, Eleanor. Can I ask you something else?" "Sure. Why does Dalton care so much about you, about this?" "It's not just about right and wrong. There's something personal." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "His mother was a waitress. Long time ago. Someone treated her the way you treated me. But nobody stood up for her. And she couldn't handle it. She killed herself when Dalton was 13. Prescott felt like he'd been punched in the chest. He's been protecting people like me ever since, making sure nobody has to stand alone the way she did." She got out of the car, started toward her house, then turned back. "You remind me of my son, Press. Before the drugs, before the mistakes. He was a good kid who made bad choices because nobody taught him how to make good ones. You still have time to learn. Don't waste it." She disappeared into her house. Prescott sat in his car for a long time, thinking about mothers who killed themselves, sons who became addicts, women who worked 2 jobs and still barely survived, thinking about the fact that he'd never once had to worry about any of that, and he'd used that privilege to hurt people. The next morning, Prescott arrived at the diner at 5:30 instead of 5:45. Eleanor was already there. "You're early. Thought I could help with setup." They worked side by side. Easy silence. The kind of silence that comes from people who've moved past awkwardness into something like understanding. At 7:15, the rumble started. The Iron Brotherhood arrived, same as always. But this time when Dalton walked in and saw Prescott already working, already moving with Eleanor's efficiency, already becoming part of the rhythm of this place, he smiled. Small, almost hidden, but there. And Prescott Whitmore, who'd spent 19 years chasing approval from people who didn't matter, felt something shift. Maybe this approval did matter. Maybe these people mattered. Maybe showing up and doing the work and treating people with dignity mattered more than anything he'd done before. Week 4 started. The rhythm continued. The learning deepened. and Prescott started to feel something he'd never felt before: purpose. But on Tuesday of week 4 at 2:30 in the afternoon, everything changed. A black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Government plates. Two men in suits got out. FBI agents by the look of them. They walked into the diner. Flashed badges. "We're looking for Dalton Grayson. We have some questions about the Iron Brotherhood Motorcycle Club." Dutch stepped forward. "What kind of questions? The kind we can't discuss with you. Is Mr. Grayson here? Number comes in Thursdays usually, then we'll be back Thursday. In the meantime, we'll need access to your security footage, all of it. Going back 3 months. Eleanor appeared from the kitchen. Her face had gone pale. "What's this about, ma'am?" "We're conducting an investigation. That's all I can say." They took the footage, left business cards, drove away. And Eleanor Brennan, who'd finally started to feel safe, who'd finally started to believe that maybe things were getting better, felt the ground shift beneath her feet, because she knew what this was, knew who was behind it. Senator Randall Whitmore had made his move, and everything they'd built over the last 4 weeks was about to come crashing down. The phone call came at 11:30 that night. Prescott was lying in his childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, still wearing the clothes that smelled like fryer grease and coffee. His father hadn't spoken to him in 3 days. Not since the FBI showed up at the diner. Not since Prescott came home and demanded to know what he'd done. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. Prescott almost didn't answer, but something told him to pick up. "Hello, it's Dalton. We need to talk." Prescott sat up. "How did you get my number?" "Doesn't matter. Meet me at the diner. 20 minutes. Come alone." The line went dead. Prescott should have ignored it, should have stayed in bed, should have let whatever was happening happen without getting more involved. But Eleanor's face when those FBI agents walked in kept flashing through his mind. The way her hands had started shaking. The way she'd looked at him like maybe this was his fault. Maybe it was. He drove to Red Oak Diner through empty streets. The only car on the road at this hour. The town asleep except for the occasional porch light and the hum of street lamps that had been flickering since before he was born. The diner was dark except for one light in the back. Dalton's motorcycle sat alone in the parking lot. Prescott pulled in beside it, killed the engine, sat there for a moment gathering courage he didn't know he had. The back door was unlocked. Dalton sat at table 9, 2 cups of coffee already poured. Like he'd known Prescott would come. Like he'd never doubted it. "Sit." Prescott sat. They looked at each other across the table. A 61-year-old man who'd built his life around protecting people. A 19-year-old kid who was just starting to understand what protection meant. "Your father called the FBI, filed a complaint, said the Iron Brotherhood was a criminal organization, said we coerced his son, threatened him, extorted your family. That's not true, I know that. You know that. But the FBI has to investigate, and investigations have a way of destroying things even when they don't find anything. Dutch could lose his business license. Eleanor could lose her job. I could lose my law license, which means I can't help veterans anymore. All because your father wants to protect his political career." Prescott's hands clenched into fists. "I'll tell them. I'll tell the FBI it's not true. I'll testify. They won't believe you. You're his son. They'll think you're covering, or that we got to you, or that you're suffering from some kind of Stockholm syndrome. Then what do we do?" Dalton took a sip of coffee. Slow, deliberate. The way a man drinks when he's already made his decision and is just waiting for the right moment to reveal it. "We fight back, but not the way you think. Not with lawyers and press conferences. With the truth. The kind of truth that people can see. I don't understand. You will, but first I need to know something. Are you here because you're scared of your father? Or because you actually give a damn about what happens to Eleanor?" Prescott didn't answer right away. Couldn't. Because the honest answer was complicated. Because 4 weeks ago, it would have been pure self-preservation. But now he thought about Eleanor's hands shaking when the agents walked in. Thought about Dutch's face going hard when they demanded his security footage. Thought about the way this place had started to feel like somewhere he belonged. Both. But mostly because of Eleanor and Dutch. And you guys. Because you gave me a chance when you didn't have to. Because for the first time in my life, I'm doing something that matters. And I don't want to lose that. Dalton studied him, then nodded once. "Good. Then here's what we're going to do. He slid a folder across the table. Prescott opened it. Inside were documents, bank records, emails, transaction histories, names and numbers that didn't mean anything at first, then started to form a pattern, a terrible pattern. What is this evidence? A journalist named Colleen Mathis has been investigating your father for 2 years. She approached me yesterday, wanted to know if I had any information that might help her case. What case? Your father has been embezzling from the Veterans Affairs Healthcare Fund for 7 years. $4.2 million. Money meant for medical treatment, for prescriptions, for therapy, for the men and women who served their country and came back broken. Money that instead went into offshore accounts, into campaign slush funds, into the lifestyle that gave you everything you ever wanted. Prescott felt sick. Dalton flipped to a specific page, highlighted a name, Frank Brennan, Eleanor's husband, died of lung cancer in 2011 because his treatment was deemed not cost-effective after his benefits were mysteriously reduced. Died because Randall Whitmore needed money for his re-election campaign. Prescott stared at the name, at the dates, at the cold bureaucratic language that meant a man died gasping for air while his wife watched helplessly. My father killed Eleanor's husband. Your father killed 73 veterans over 7 years. Frank was just one of them. Prescott's hands were shaking now, really shaking. There's more. Dalton pulled out another document. Eleanor doesn't talk about this much, but 15 years ago, she wasn't a waitress. She was an Army nurse, worked at the VA hospital in Great Falls. She saw what was happening, the denied claims, the reduced benefits, the patients dying because they couldn't get care. She reported it, documented everything, filed complaints. What happened? Your father was the lawyer who defended the administrator she accused. He destroyed her credibility, made her look like a disgruntled employee making things up. She lost her job, lost her nursing license, her whole career, had to take work as a waitress to survive. And then 8 years later, her husband died in the same system she tried to fix, the system your father protected. Prescott couldn't breathe. So Eleanor's been twice destroyed by my father. Once in 2008, once in 2011. Twice that we know of. Dalton leaned forward. Colleen's ready to publish. She has enough evidence to bring your father down. But she wants a source who will go on record. Someone from inside the family. Someone who can verify that the luxurious lifestyle the senator's been living didn't come from his salary. She wants me. She wants someone willing to tell the truth, even when it costs everything. Prescott looked at the folder, at the evidence of his father's crimes, at the names of dead veterans, at Eleanor's name appearing again and again in the documents. A woman who tried to do the right thing and been punished for it. Twice. If I do this, my father goes to prison. If you do this, 73 families get justice. Eleanor gets justice. And maybe the next veteran who needs help actually gets it. If I do this, my family disowns me. My mother, my future, everything I was supposed to be. What were you supposed to be? Press Dalton's voice was gentle. A senator's son who never questioned where the money came from. A man who treated people like Eleanor as invisible. Is that really what you want to be? Prescott thought about Clayton Fletcher, about Gideon's face, about Eleanor teaching him that small kindnesses add up, about learning to pour coffee without shaking, about the way it felt to finally matter. No, that's not who I want to be anymore. Then what do you want to do next? There was that phrase again, the thing Eleanor kept saying, the thing that had become a lifeline. Prescott looked at Dalton, at this man who'd spent 48 years trying to protect people the way nobody protected his mother, who'd given Prescott a chance to become something better. I want to tell the truth, even if it destroys everything, especially if it destroys everything, because maybe that's what needs to happen. Dalton nodded, stood, extended his hand. Then let's burn it all down and build something better. Prescott shook his hand and felt the last piece of his old life crumble away. 3 days later, on a gray Thursday morning, with rain threatening Prescott, Whitmore stood on the steps of the Millbrook County Courthouse with a microphone in front of him and 27 members of the local press crowding the lawn. His father had no idea this was happening. Neither did his father's lawyers. Neither did anyone except Dalton Eleanor and Colleen Mathis. Colleen had spent the last 72 hours preparing him, teaching him how to speak to cameras, how to hold his ground when reporters shouted questions, how to tell the truth in a way that couldn't be twisted or misunderstood. But standing here now with the cameras pointed at him like weapons, Prescott felt his carefully rehearsed words evaporate. His hands were shaking. His voice would probably shake too. But Eleanor had taught him something over the last 4 weeks. You do the hard thing anyway. You show up even when you're scared, especially when you're scared. He cleared his throat, began. My name is Prescott Whitmore. I'm the son of Senator Randall Whitmore. 4 weeks ago, I spit in the face of a 62-year-old waitress named Eleanor Brennan because she brought me the wrong breakfast order. I did it because I've been raised my entire life to believe that people like her don't matter, that service workers are beneath me, that my family's money and power make me better than everyone else. His voice cracked. He pushed through. I was wrong about everything. The Iron Brotherhood Motorcycle Club didn't threaten me. They gave me an opportunity to learn what I should have been taught my whole life, that dignity matters, that work matters, that how you treat people when you have power over them tells you everything about your character. He pulled out the folder, held it up. This is evidence that my father has been stealing from veterans for 7 years. $4.2 million that should have gone to health care for men and women who served this country. One of those veterans was Frank Brennan, Eleanor's husband. He died because he couldn't get the treatment he needed. He died because my father valued his political career more than a man's life. The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Prescott held up his hand. I'm releasing all of this evidence to the press today. I'm also cooperating fully with the FBI investigation. Not the fake one my father started to destroy the Iron Brotherhood. The real one. The one that should have happened years ago. He paused, looked directly into the camera. And I'm doing this because Eleanor Brennan taught me that you can't change the past. You can only change what you do next. This is what I'm doing next. He stepped away from the microphone. Colleen Mathis took his place, began distributing documents to the press corps. Prescott walked down the courthouse steps on legs that felt like water. Dalton was waiting at the bottom. Knox, Merritt, Shepard, the whole Brotherhood. They'd come, stood witness, made sure he didn't have to do this alone. You did good, kid. Dalton's voice, quiet, proud. I just destroyed my father's career, maybe my own life. I don't know what happens now. Now you find out what you're made of. Now you learn that doing the right thing doesn't always feel good, but it's still right. Eleanor stood behind them. She'd closed the diner for the morning to be here, to see this. When Prescott met her eyes, he saw tears. Thank you, her voice barely audible over the chaos of the press conference behind them. I'm sorry it took me this long. I'm sorry about Frank. I'm sorry, my family, I know. And I forgive you. That's what you do when someone actually changes. You forgive them, you let them start over. The next 72 hours were chaos. Senator Whitmore's office issued a statement denying everything, called Prescott a troubled young man suffering from delusions, blamed the Iron Brotherhood for brainwashing his son. But the evidence was too solid, too detailed. Bank records don't lie, email trails don't lie. By Friday afternoon, the FBI had shifted its investigation from the Brotherhood to the senator. By Saturday morning, 2 major newspapers had run front-page stories. By Sunday, Senator Randall Whitmore's chief of staff had resigned. Prescott spent those 3 days at the diner, working, because he didn't know what else to do, because the work kept him grounded, because Eleanor and Dutch and the Brotherhood needed him. And for the first time in his life, being needed felt like something worth having. His father tried to call 37 times. Prescott didn't answer. What was there to say? Everything had been said. Everything had been done. On Monday morning, a week after the press conference, the video finally surfaced. Not the security footage from the diner. That had been seized by the FBI and wasn't public record. But someone had been in the diner that morning 4 weeks ago with a phone. Someone had recorded the whole thing. Prescott spitting on Eleanor, the Brotherhood standing up, the confrontation. It went viral in 6 hours. 8 million views by Tuesday morning, 15 million by Wednesday. The hashtag Justice for Eleanor was trending across every platform. Dutch's phone rang off the hook. News crews showed up at the diner. Eleanor couldn't walk to the bus stop without cameras following her, and a GoFundMe appeared. Nobody knew who started it. The account was anonymous. But the goal was simple. Help Eleanor Brennan. Help a woman who'd spent 31 years serving others finally get a break. It hit $50,000 in the first day, $200,000 by the end of the week. By the time it closed 2 weeks later, it had raised $1.8 million. Eleanor sat at table 9 staring at the number on Dutch's computer screen. Dalton beside her. Prescott across from her. She couldn't speak, couldn't process, couldn't believe. This isn't real. Her voice, broken, overwhelmed. It's real, Ellie. People saw what happened. Saw you. Saw your dignity. And they wanted to help. I don't deserve this. You deserve this more than anyone I've ever met. Dalton's voice. Firm, certain. Eleanor cried then, really cried. 31 years of holding it together, finally breaking. And Prescott, who'd caused this, who'd been the reason she needed help in the first place, felt something crack open in his chest. This was what redemption looked like. Not erasing what you'd done, but standing in the wreckage of it and helping rebuild. Being part of the solution even when you'd been the problem. The legal proceedings moved fast once they started. Senator Randall Whitmore was indicted on 17 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and misappropriation of federal funds. He resigned from the Senate 2 days after the indictment, pled guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence, 8 years in federal prison, eligible for parole in 5. Prescott sat in the courtroom for the sentencing. His mother hadn't come. She'd filed for divorce a week after the indictment, was already living with her sister in Connecticut, already pretending this had never happened. But Prescott came because his father was still his father, because some debts you can't walk away from. Randall Whitmore looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit, older, diminished. When they let him out of the courtroom, he looked at Prescott just once. Their eyes met. Prescott expected anger, expected blame, expected his father to mouth something venomous about betrayal. Instead, Randall Whitmore nodded, small, almost imperceptible. The way you nod when you finally understand something you have been refusing to see. Then he was gone, led through a door into a future that would be very different from the one he'd planned. Prescott sat in the empty courtroom for a long time after everyone left, wondering what came next, wondering who he was now that his family name meant scandal instead of power, wondering if he'd made the right choice. You wondering if it was worth it, Eleanor's voice. She'd come to the sentencing too. Sat in the back row, waited until everyone left. Yeah, was it? I don't know. I destroyed my father, my family, my whole life. No, your father destroyed himself. You just stopped protecting him from the consequences. There's a difference, she sat beside him. They looked at the empty judge's bench together. What happens now? Prescott asked. For me, I'm retiring. Dutch is selling the diner. I'm going to use some of that GoFundMe money to go back to school. Finish my nursing degree. Maybe I can help people the way Doc helps people. That's amazing. What about you? What happens to Prescott Whitmore now? He thought about it, really thought about it. I don't want to be Prescott Whitmore anymore. That guy was an asshole. I'm just Press now. Just a kid who's trying to figure out how to be better than he was. Good. That's a good place to start. But Eleanor wasn't done. She had one more thing to say, one more truth to tell, and it would change everything. Press, there's something I need to tell you. Something about why your father destroyed my life twice. She took a deep breath. I told you I was an Army nurse, that I reported the corruption at the VA. What I didn't tell you was what I found. When I was documenting the denied claims, the reduced benefits, I discovered it wasn't just administrative incompetence. It was deliberate, systematic. Someone was manipulating the system to funnel money out. I had evidence, names, account numbers. I gave it all to the Inspector General in 2008, and my father made you look crazy. Your father was the lawyer who defended the people I accused, but he was also more than that. He was involved, Press. He was one of the architects of the scheme. I couldn't prove it then, but I knew, and he knew I knew. Destroying my credibility wasn't just about winning a case, it was about protecting himself. Prescott felt nauseous. And then Frank. Your father didn't just let Frank die through bureaucratic indifference. He personally flagged Frank's file, made sure his benefits were denied. It was revenge for what I tried to do 8 years earlier. My father murdered your husband. Your father killed a lot of people, Press. Frank was just the one I loved. Eleanor's voice was steady. No tears now, just truth. I forgave you for spitting on me because you were young and stupid and didn't know better. But your father, he knew exactly what he was doing. Every step, every death, every family destroyed, he knew. Are you telling me this so I'll hate him? I'm telling you this so you understand. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending it didn't matter. It means choosing not to let hate consume you. I forgive your father, Press, not because he deserves it, because I deserve to be free. She stood up. Prescott stood with her. Tomorrow they're having the final hearing, the one where the families of the veterans can give victim impact statements. I'm going to testify, and I want you there, not to support me, but to see what your father's choices actually cost, to understand what you helped expose, to remember why this mattered. I'll be there. The hearing room was packed. 73 families, some brought photos of their loved ones, some brought medical records, some just brought their grief raw and unprocessed and demanding to be witnessed. Eleanor was called to testify third. She walked to the front with that same quiet dignity Prescott had seen her carry plates and pour coffee. She placed a photo on the stand. Frank in his Army uniform, young, smiling, alive. My name is Eleanor Brennan. I was an Army nurse for 12 years. I loved my work. I loved helping veterans get the care they had earned. In 2008, I discovered corruption in the VA system. I reported it. I provided evidence. I did everything I was supposed to do. Her voice was steady. Senator Whitmore destroyed my career, made me unemployable, took away my nursing license. I had to work as a waitress to survive, to feed my family. I didn't mind the work. Honest work is honest work. But I minded what was happening to the veterans I couldn't help anymore. She touched Frank's photo. 8 years later, my husband Frank was diagnosed with lung cancer. He'd served 2 tours in Vietnam. Exposed to Agent Orange, he needed treatment, chemo, radiation. The VA denied his claim, said his cancer wasn't service-related, said the treatment was too expensive. We appealed and appealed and appealed, but someone had flagged his file. Someone had made sure he wouldn't get help. Frank died in our bedroom, in my arms, gasping for air, asking me why nobody would help him, why the country he'd served had abandoned him. I didn't have an answer. I just held him until he stopped breathing. The courtroom was silent. Eleanor looked directly at where Randall Whitmore sat in his orange jumpsuit, flanked by guards. For 15 years, I've carried hate for you, Senator. Hate for what you did to my career. Hate for what you did to Frank. Hate for every veteran who died because you chose money over their lives. That hate was like poison. It was killing me slowly, making me bitter, making me small. She took a breath. But I'm not going to carry it anymore. Not because you deserve forgiveness. You don't. But because I deserve freedom. I deserve to stop letting you take pieces of my soul. So I forgive you, Senator Whitmore. Not for you, for me. So I can finally be free of what you did. Tears streamed down her face now, but her voice never wavered. I hope you spend your time in prison thinking about the 73 people you killed. I hope their faces haunt you. I hope you finally understand what you took from their families. And I hope that someday, somehow, you find a way to make peace with what you've done. Because I have. She picked up Frank's photo, walked back to her seat. The courtroom erupted in applause. The judge banged his gavel for order, but nothing could contain the wave of emotion that Eleanor had unleashed. Prescott watched from the gallery, tears on his own face, because he just witnessed something he didn't know was possible. The power of forgiveness, not as weakness, but as the most radical act of strength he'd ever seen. When Eleanor sat down, she looked at him and smiled, a real smile, the kind that comes from finally laying down a burden you've carried too long. After the hearing, after Randall Whitmore was led away to begin his 8-year sentence, after the families had dispersed and the courtroom emptied, Prescott found Eleanor outside. How do you do that, he asked. How do you forgive someone who destroyed your life twice, practice? And understanding that forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. Hate is heavy, Press. It's exhausting. I was tired of carrying it. My father doesn't deserve what you gave him today. No, but I deserve to give it. That's the difference. She started walking toward the parking lot. Prescott followed. What are you going to do now? With the money, with your freedom. I'm going to build something. Something Frank would be proud of. Something that makes sure what happened to him doesn't happen to anyone else. Like what? A free clinic. For veterans. No insurance required, no bureaucracy, no denials, just care. The way it should have been all along. That's, that's incredible. I want you to help me run it. Prescott stopped walking. You're studying social work, right? You want to help people. Here's your chance. Help me build something that matters. Help me turn all this pain into something odd. I don't know if I'm qualified. Neither was I when I started. We'll learn together. She extended her hand. So what do you say, Press? You want to change what you do next? He looked at her hand, at this woman who'd been destroyed twice and chose to build instead of break, who'd forgiven the unforgivable because freedom mattered more than revenge. He shook her hand. Yes, yes I do. 6 months later, on a cold November morning, Red Oak Diner closed its doors for the last time. Dutch had sold it to a developer. A chain restaurant was going in. Something generic and profitable and completely soulless. But Dutch was 77. He'd earned his retirement, earned his peace. The last breakfast service was invitation only. Timothy Hodges, the regulars, the Iron Brotherhood, Eleanor, Prescott. They sat at their usual tables, ate their usual orders, said goodbye to a place that had meant something. But the real ceremony happened afterward when Dutch unlocked a storage room in the back and pulled out a brass plaque. Made this special. Figured it needed to go somewhere that matters. The plaque read, Margaret's Place, reserved for Iron Brotherhood, MC Protectors of Dignity. This is for your mom, Hammer, for what she meant, for what you built in her name. Dalton took the plaque, ran his fingers over the engraved letters. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. Where should it go? Somewhere that needs protecting. Somewhere service workers need to know someone's watching. Somewhere people need to remember that dignity isn't negotiable. They installed it 3 days later at a small diner across town, a place that reminded them of Red Oak. The owner understood what the plaque meant, what it represented. Table 9 became sacred space again, and every Thursday the Brotherhood returned, kept their ritual, kept their promise. Prescott worked at the new diner part-time while finishing community college. He transferred from Georgetown, couldn't afford it anymore, didn't want it anymore. He was studying social work now, wanted to help people the way he'd been helped. He lived in a small apartment he could barely afford, drove a used Honda because the Mercedes had been seized as part of his father's asset forfeiture, worked 40 hours a week on top of school because that's what you did when your trust fund evaporated and you had to learn how real people lived. It was hard, exhausting, sometimes humiliating. It was also the most honest thing he'd ever done. Eleanor visited the diner sometimes. She'd finished her nursing degree, was working at building the free clinic for veterans. The first location would open in spring. Right next to the VA hospital, a constant reminder of what should have been there all along. One Thursday morning, she walked in and found Dalton at table 9. Got something to show you. She pulled out her phone, showed him a photo. A young man in his early 20s, sober, clean, smiling tentatively like someone who's learning how to hope again. Who's that Daniel? My son. He's being released next month. Early parole, good behavior. He's been sober 3 years. Going into a halfway house. Wants to meet Maisie when he's ready. Dalton studied the photo, saw something of Eleanor in the young man's eyes, something worth saving. You believe he's changed? I believe people can change if they want to badly enough, if they have support, if someone gives them a chance. She looked across the diner. Prescott was serving an elderly couple, patient, kind, nothing like the boy who'd spit on her 6 months ago. Look at Press. 6 months ago, I would have said he was hopeless. Now look at him, working 2 jobs, going to school, volunteering at the homeless shelter on weekends. People can change, Hammer. We just have to let them. Dalton nodded. Your husband would be proud of you, of what you're doing at the VA, of giving Daniel another chance. I think about Frank every day. Think about how different things might have been if someone had stood up for him, if someone had stopped what was happening. You can't change the past, no, but you can change what you do next. There was that phrase again, the one Eleanor had used to pull herself through the hard days, the one that had become a mantra for all of them. You can't change the past. You can only change what you do next. The door opened. A young woman walked in, early 20s, nervous, looking around like she wasn't sure she belonged. Prescott approached. Morning, sit anywhere you like. The woman sat at the counter. Prescott poured coffee without being asked. She looked up, grateful. You're Prescott Whitmore. I recognize you from the news. Just press. And yeah, that's me. I wanted to meet you. To thank you. My dad was one of the veterans who got his benefits restored after your father's case. He's getting treatment now. He's going to be okay because of what you did. Prescott set down the coffee pot, felt something warm in his chest. Not pride exactly, something quieter, something sustainable. I'm glad your dad's okay. Really glad. It takes courage to stand up to your own family, to choose what's right over what's easy. I just wanted you to know that it mattered. She paid for her coffee, left a $5 tip on a $2 cup, walked out. Prescott stood there holding the $5 bill, thinking about all the people he'd never meet who'd been helped by what he'd done, all the veterans getting care, all the families staying together, all the small ripples spreading from one choice to tell the truth. Dalton appeared beside him. You did good, Press. I destroyed my whole life. No, you destroyed the life you were supposed to have. The one your father built on lies and stolen money. You're building a different life now. An honest one. That's worth more. Is it? Some days it doesn't feel worth it. Some days I wonder what would have happened if I just kept my mouth shut, if I'd protected him. Then he'd still be stealing. People would still be dying, and you'd still be the kid who spit on Eleanor. Is that what you want? No. Then you made the right choice. Right choices don't always feel good, but they're still right. The months rolled on. Winter came. Snow fell on Millbrook. The new diner became a fixture. Prescott kept working, kept studying, kept showing up. His mother called once, asked if he wanted to come for Christmas. He said no. She didn't push. They were strangers now. Maybe they always had been. But he spent Christmas at Eleanor's house. Her Maisie and Daniel, who'd been out of prison for a month and was doing well. Nervous, uncertain, but doing well. They ate ham and sweet potatoes, watched Maisie open presents. Daniel taught her how to play chess. Eleanor caught Prescott's eye across the table and smiled. This was family, not the one you're born into, the one you build, the one that sees you at your worst and chooses you anyway. In February, Prescott graduated community college, top of his class, full scholarship to State University for his bachelor's. The whole Brotherhood came to the ceremony. Eleanor, Dutch, even Timothy Hodges. No one from his blood family showed up, but the family he'd built filled 2 rows. And when they called his name, when he walked across that stage, they stood and cheered like he'd won the lottery. Maybe he had. In March, Dalton showed him something. An old newspaper clipping from 1978. An obituary. Margaret Ann Grayson, age 36, survived by son Dalton 13, funeral services private. This is why I do what I do, why the Brotherhood exists, why I stood up for Eleanor. Because nobody stood up for my mom, and I swore that would never happen again. Not while I was breathing. Prescott looked at the faded photo. Margaret looked like Eleanor. Same tired eyes, same determined smile, same dignity, despite everything. Do you think she'd be proud of you, of what you built? I hope so. I think about her every day. Think about what might have happened if someone had intervened, if someone had made the kid who humiliated her learn better. Maybe she'd still be here. You can't change the past. No, but you can change what you do next. And that's what I've been doing for 48 years, what we've all been doing, making sure nobody stands alone. They sat in silence for a moment, 2 men separated by 42 years, but connected by the same understanding, the same commitment. Thank you for not giving up on me. Prescott's voice quiet. I almost did. That first day when you spit on Eleanor, I wanted to put you through a wall. But I remembered something my mom used to say. She said everybody deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment. I'm glad I gave you that chance. Me too. On a warm day in May, nearly a year after that morning at Red Oak Diner, Prescott stood at Arlington National Cemetery in front of a headstone. Frank Joseph Brennan, Sergeant United States Army, 1954 to 2011, beloved husband and father. Eleanor stood beside him. She visited once a month, always brought flowers, always spent an hour talking to a man who couldn't hear her anymore but maybe felt her presence anyway. I never got to meet him, but I'm sorry. Sorry for what my father did. Sorry that Frank didn't get the care he deserved. I know. And Frank would have liked you, Press. The you that you are now. He believed in second chances. Believed people could change if they worked at it. She placed fresh flowers on the grave. White roses. Frank's favorite. You know what the hardest part is? Not the anger. I processed that. It's the what ifs. What if he'd gotten treatment? What if we'd had 10 more years, 20? What if Maisie had gotten to know her grandfather? I can't give you those years back. I can't fix what my father broke, but I can make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. That's what I'm going to do. Spend my life making sure veterans get what they deserve. Eleanor looked at him. This young man who'd been a monster and was becoming something better. Not perfect, still learning, but trying, always trying. That's all any of us can do. Show up, try, make tomorrow a little better than today. They walked back to the car together, the spring sun warm on their shoulders, the cemetery quiet except for the wind through the trees and the distant sound of taps playing somewhere for someone else who'd served and fallen. Life moved forward. It always did. The trick was moving forward in the right direction. That night, Prescott sat at his small apartment desk and wrote a letter. He'd been writing it for weeks, revising, trying to get the words right. It was addressed to the parole board, a character reference for his father. Not defending what Randall Whitmore had done, not asking for leniency, just acknowledging that people were more than their worst acts. That redemption was possible if you worked for it. His father had 5 years left on his sentence. Prescott would write him once a month. Short letters, updates on life, never asking for anything, never expecting anything. Just letting his father know that someone still saw him as human. Because Eleanor had taught him that dignity worked both ways. You didn't withdraw it from people who'd lost their way. You held it steady, reminded them it was still there, waited to see if they'd reach for it. Maybe his father would, maybe he wouldn't. Either way, Prescott would keep trying. That's what you did when you learned that love looked like accountability, like truth, like refusing to protect people from the consequences of their choices while still believing they could make better choices tomorrow. You kept showing up, kept trying, kept changing what you did next. On the first Thursday of June, Prescott walked into the diner for his morning shift. The Brotherhood was already at table 9. Eleanor sat with them. She didn't work here anymore, but came by sometimes. Kept the connection. Dalton waved him over. Got something for you. He pulled out a leather vest, black, well-worn, the kind that told stories. On the back was a patch, not the Iron Brotherhood colors, something different. A hand extended in help. The words beneath protector in training. You've earned this, not full membership. That takes years, but you've shown you understand what we're about, what we stand for. You're one of us now, Press, long as you want to be. Prescott took the vest, felt the weight of it, the responsibility, the honor. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just keep being who you're becoming. Keep protecting people. Keep standing up. Keep learning. That's all we ask. Prescott put on the vest. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for him, like he'd been made for it. He looked around the table. At Knox, who'd taught him to fix things. At Merritt, who'd taught him to stay calm. At Shepard, who'd taught him about repentance. At Dalton, who'd taught him about honor. At Eleanor, who'd taught him that dignity wasn't about what people gave you. It was about what you refused to surrender. Thank you for all of it, for giving me a chance when I didn't deserve one. Everybody deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment. Dalton's voice. Your worst moment brought you here. What you did with it after that, that's what matters. The day stretched ahead, tables to serve, coffee to pour, people to take care of. Simple work, honest work. Work that mattered because it served others. Prescott tied his apron over the vest, picked up a coffee pot, started his rounds. Outside, the Montana sun climbed higher. The town woke up. People started their days, each carrying their own burdens, each deserving dignity, each deserving someone to stand up when standing was needed. And inside a small diner with a brass plaque on the wall, 10 men and 1 woman kept their promise. They showed up. They protected. They reminded the world that honor still existed if you looked for it, that people could change if given the chance, that what you did next mattered more than what you'd done before. And that dignity, once defended, rippled outward in ways you'd never see but would matter forever. The coffee poured. The day began. The work continued. And Prescott Whitmore, once the third, now just press, finally understood what his life was for. Not for power, not for wealth, not for status, for service, for protection, for standing between cruelty and the people who couldn't fight it alone, for being the person who showed up when showing up mattered most. That was enough. That would always be enough.